So I brought along the Insta360 X4 on a recent hike, and on this hike I filmed a bunch of sample clips. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to share a bunch of those sample clips with you, approximately 10 minutes of clips, so you can see how this camera does in that type of filming situation. Most of the clips in the video you're about to see were filmed in 8K, and either 8K24 or 8K30. A couple of them were filmed in 5.7K 60. And then each of these clips, I've already reframed them. They're already put into the finished product. And as I share this footage with you, I am going to tell you about some of my thoughts on the quality of the footage as we go along. And I'll also talk a little bit about the hiking adventure as well. Now, the first thing I noticed right away here in the woods is the detail. The detail in the trees, the leaves, the branches, it looks good. It's not overly sharp, but it's also not overly soft. And those trees, by the way, are nice and straight. That Mega View Field of View did a really good job with that. The colors, I also like how the colors are nice and punchy there. I did film this in flat and then did a little bit of color grading there. The color grading is pretty limited. I like it that I can use a mode for color grading. So this one, you can see a little bit of that motion ND effect that I added there as we move along the ground. And I, of course, reframed this later on for the pan. Right here is almost a type of drone shot. I was using the extended selfie stick, and I had that about 8 feet up in the air, showing my two sons hiking ahead. Once again, great detail there. I like how that looks. And what I also like is in the background there, you can see some of the mountains further up. And like right there, you can see some of the cloud detail. Now, this was not the greatest day with the sky for filming, because it was kind of that milky, smooth white in the sky. There wasn't a lot of blue, unfortunately. If there was the blue there, it would have looked extra good. There will be some blue when we get to the top, by the way. Speaking of blue, I love how those blue colors on my wife and daughter pop. They pop really nicely in that scene. And on this trail, you come to a T, and then you take a hard left to keep going up the mountain. And there's some nice rhododendron and mountain laurel along here. Some of those were already blooming. That was pretty cool. This shot has a good bit of motion ND in there. And we've got another reframed pan shot right here that started off the ground, panned up. Again, that would have been great if there was a blue sky there. Would have liked that versus that milky white. But the milky white did make the darker colored trees pop nicely. Here's a great motion ND effect right here. The ground has that nice motion blur as we move along. Another drone type shot. Right here, I was careful to have the X4 kind of smoothly glide through the trees on my extended selfie stick. But I was also careful not to impact a branch or anything like that. And here I reframed it so it's looking backwards as well. And then we have a little bit of a pan around to show where we're headed. Really like how it did with the moss on the ground here. And again, motion ND effect applied. So I have scenes with and without the motion ND effect. I kind of like both. The motion ND is great if you're moving along at a fast enough speed. Like here, I was moving along pretty good right here. And when you're close to the ground, I think I like it better. If you have the X4 further away from an object, in a way, I almost prefer the motion ND not being turned on. And if you look on the horizon here, when I pan left again and ahead of us, you can see the final peak right up here that we need to get to the top of. And as you can see, there's still quite a distance to getting there. And during this part of the hike, we had quite a cloud deck move, and it actually got pretty dark. But I really like how the camera handled here. No problems with any of that weird ghosting or jitter. This is intentional motion ND effect here. And that footage still looks good. No problems with the stabilization. here we came down to a gap, and this is the final gap before the final ascent. Beyond this gap, you go through quite a few darker pine trees you see up here, and it actually gets very dark. Right here you can see those darker trees. But I like the detail that the X4 still picked up, even in that darker scene. There's plenty of detail there, and it looks good. It's hard to tell here, but the X4 makes it easier to tell that it is a steep climb versus some other cameras. I love how I was able to reframe these shots. And there's a good bit of cloud detail out there too if you look over through those pines, and you can see some of the distant mountain ridges. Right there's another place where you can see that. So a lot of good background detail. The highlights weren't entirely blown out, anything like that. There's plenty of detail there. And that's why I made sure you knew it was a fairly milky colored sky that day. That's not blown out highlights, that is actually a pretty white sky. There we go, another nice reframe as my son's climbing, looking back at all those mountain ridges and some of the clouds in the background. This guy, my other son on my back, he's a very happy hiker up there. I loved reframing it here when we're going along the switchbacks. Made for a really nice perspective. I didn't have to have my camera panning around, I was just able to hold it in one place and then reframe later on. As you can see, we're getting closer to that final ridge. It's ahead of us. Once again, my son having a great time on my back. It starts to get quite rocky during this part of the hike. Plenty of rocks to climb over, but nothing like the AT New England. If you've hiked the AT New England, you know what I'm talking about. Rocks everywhere there. Climbing Mount Washington, lots of rocks. Compared to that, this is quite easy. We're getting real close to the top now. The way you know we're getting close to the top is you look ahead and you can see a lot of sky. You don't see ground looming ahead of you. So what I did here is I did the approach to the summit. I had my wife and daughter ahead of myself, and my son, he was already up there at the summit, just to show that grand entrance to the summit. And soon after we got to the summit, there started to be a break in the clouds and we got some blue sky. You'll see that here in a moment. The summit used to have an old fire tower on it that was dismantled quite a time ago, but the foundation concrete is still there. My wife was getting some great pictures there. And so this is some of those extended selfie stick shots. I did a few of those up there just to kind of show the scene. And it looks like a drone. Drones are not permitted to be flown here, so that's a really nice thing about the extended selfie stick. Snack time, of course, at the top. My kids love snack time. He's very focused on his snack right there. Part of the motivation for hiking. And here's another one of those 360 pans with the camera. And there's very good views from up here. You can see in almost all directions. And quite a few cloud details are captured there too. Again, it's not blown out highlights. It was just a kind of a non-interesting sky, but at least there was some blue breaking through. And some of those darker clouds contrasting look nice. Another perspective from the top. And then I went beyond the summit to the other side for a little ways and then came back. And this is looking east-northeast from the summit. You can see the Blue Ridge Mountains up through there. This is looking west-northwest. So that's looking out toward West Virginia. And then we are beginning our descent to go back. We had all of our snacks. We stopped to enjoy the scenery with the cameras off as well. That's an important part of hiking adventures. And I didn't film a lot of clips on the way down because it's an out and back type of hike in this particular scenario. But it started to get brighter on the way back, so I wanted to capture a couple clips with the sun more so out and less dark. Not that the X4 didn't do good in the dark, it did do quite well. And I even used the 8K mode, which isn't necessarily recommended for lower light footage, but it did great with that, no problems. And we are almost back to the road here. Very steep descent on the way down, especially with my 3-year-old on my back. My knees and calves felt that. And then final, a shot with a big quick zoom in, and even reframed, that still looks great. If you haven't already checked out my complete beginner's guide and best settings for the Insta360 X4, check out this video right here.